Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where you can be, belong, and become the very best version of yourselves. So, wherever you're joining us, again, whether that be Florida, California, Tennessee, wherever it is, we just want to say thank you for joining us in this journey. We spend a lot of time, a lot of energy looking at these ancient texts. We'll look at the original language, the author's intent. We'll look at who the audience is. We'll look at so many different interpretations, all so that you can better understand this book, this compilation of books called Torah. Right? And even more so, not just Torah, but even the New Testament and the understanding of who Jesus is, what the message is, isn't all of it. And then what we do is we take all that information, because there's a lot, and then we help us make it relevant now. That's what we do at Ethos. And so we just want to say welcome again. Thank you for joining us. So today we continue the study. This is a very in-depth study. We are on chapter 24 today in the book of Genesis. And so as a reminder to anyone watching, this is not a history book. Right? We know this now. This is not a history book. This was not written to give exact perfect dates, how long someone literally lived. This was not the intention of the compilation of stories, right? The idea was they're living in the middle of Babylonian captivity. 587 BC, their temple's destroyed. They become captives in Babylon, right? So they are now under the thumb of the Babylonian Empire. And the question, of course, is, will we assimilate? Will we take on all the values, the traditions of Babylon, right? Will we take on their gods? Will we take on their rituals, right? And so Israel says, no, we're one of the few tribes that we will not do that. We will stay monotheistic, right? We will not assimilate. We want to pass down what it means to be a Hebrew onto the next generations. We don't want them to miss out on what it means to be a Hebrew. And so this whole compilation, all the stories, everything, it's all there to remind them, again, who they are. So every poem, every story, all the deep mythological stories, right? Getting swallowed by a whale, dying at the bottom only to be resurrected. All these different stories, they have deep, deep meaning for Israel. And so ask yourself every time, where is Israel in the story? And I believe once you find Israel in the story, you can find you in the story. But I would say it's so important to first find out where's the original audience. Then you can find yourself. And so Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, this is Israel miniaturized through all of the tellings. And so today we say goodbye, we begin to say goodbye to the character Abraham, the individual, the founder, right? The one who leaves, steps away from tradition into something bigger, deeper, fuller, into the fuller life. He leaves home. And so today we're going to find he leaves home only to find a way to circle back. And this is the beauty of the hero's story, right? We've talked about Joseph Campbell, the hero's story. We're going to see something really deep here today. So chapter 24, I'll read first, I'll read the sections we're going to do today. We're going to read chapter 24, 1 through 10 today, because there's a good amount there. So here we go. And Abraham was old, advanced in days, and the Lord had blessed Abraham with everything. Right? Again, it's big language, right? Huge language, everything. Was it everything? Well, it's big language. It's meant for a reason, right? So we'll continue. Abraham said to his servant, the elder of his house, who ruled over all that was his, please place your hand under my thigh. Yeah, weird. And I will adjure with you by the Lord and the God of heaven and the God of earth that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose midst I dwell. But you shall go to my land and to my birthplace. Again, the place he left, right? And you shall take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not wish to go after me to this land. Shall I return your son to the land from which you came? Right? Should I return him there? Abraham said to him, Beware lest you return my son back there. And the Lord God of the heavens, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke about me, and who swore to me, saying, to your seed I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take his wife for my son from there. And if the woman will not wish to go after you, you will be absolved of this, my oath. Only do not return my son back there. So that's the parameter, right? And the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and he swore to him concerning this matter. And the servant took 10 camels of his master's camels, and he went, and all the best of the master was in his hand. And he arose and he went to Aram Naharaim, the city of Nar. So, interesting, right? There's a lot of weird questions that might come up because we aren't Jewish. We didn't live in that time era. You're probably having some questions, and one of them's probably about the thigh. We'll get to it. But here we go. Let's first look at this first line. And Abraham was old, advanced in days, and the Lord blessed Abraham in everything, right? With everything. So again, really important to understand. When a Hebrew writes about ancient forefather, right? A founder, someone who has experienced wisdom, they'll often use numbers like 120, right? They'll use large numbers. They will use large, grand language, with every blessing, is blessed with everything they could ever want. This is all showing this individual has experienced the fullness of life and has literally walked in the fullness of wisdom. They have gained everything they need to know here on earth. They have, in modern times language, we would say they have arrived, right? They've experienced what life can give them. And so wisdom, they have experienced the pinnacle of wisdom. Yeah, 120. Beautiful. All right. And Abraham said to his servant and the elder of his house who ruled over all that was his, please place your hand under my thigh. Now, this seems really odd, right? Why is thigh? Well, we don't do that, right? That would be very weird in our culture. Why would he place his hand under his thigh? What's the idea here? What's the ritual? What does it mean in the Hebrew tradition? Well, a couple interpretations. There's two main ones. Both of them imply this idea about how to respond to authority, how to be how to learn the true act of submission. This is the idea. So two interpretations that you'll find throughout rabbinical study, right? The people who actually wrote this book, these are the two main traditions they have had since it's been written. So here's the first one. First one is it's a reminder of the promise. So understand this. I'll read it first and I'll be a little more specific. But the thigh was considered the source of posterity in the ancient world, or more properly, the loins, or watch this now, the testicles. Interesting, right? The phase under the thigh could be euphemisms for of one's loins. So this is interesting, right? There are two reasons why someone would take an oath in this manner. Number one, Abraham had promised he was promised a seed, right? A son that would take on the blessings, move Israel into the new era, right? So he's promised this, and he's promised, so of course, the promise is going to be that Isaac is going to find a wife. Yeah, so it makes sense. So it's very literally in the ancient world, it would be the man, this servant would be literally putting his hand over Abraham in a very interesting way that we would say is very odd today. But back in that era in the Middle East, that was a way in which someone would say, I believe, right, the promise that was made. May your future generations thrive. Right? I am blessing you and I'm praying that your future generations, your seed will thrive and it will live on forever, for the next generations to come. This was an enormous blessing for the head of a household. So really pretty interesting here, right? But it's a very submissive act to do so, right? It also on the action of Abraham, it's also you really have to trust that servant, right? This is a vulnerable position to be in. So very interesting point. But the second point is this. It's a reminder again of the promise that for someone to allow his hand to be sat on was a sign of submission to authority. So the idea when I put my hand there, I'm literally saying, I submit. It's an idea that Joseph actually does. And so he's showing obedience to the father by placing his hand under, Jacob's thigh. Again, the idea here, most rabbis say, this is an act of submission. It's saying, I will do whatever it takes. I will walk with you. I will do the action that needs to be taken. Right? I respect you. You have gained wisdom, fullness, life. I'm going to do the thing you need me to do. Right? I'll do the thing. Whatever the thing is that's going to bring life, because I trust that you've brought wisdom into this world. So submission, right? What does submission really mean? I think in our culture today, we get submission confused, right? There's a lot of interesting, odd nuances today. Some are very virtuous. Some are pretend virtue. Some of them are submission is a very negative concept, right? Submission is taken on many different layers as our culture has shifted and changed. And so submission, according to our definition today, is this action of like accepting or yielding to a superior force or to the authority or will of another person. That's the idea here. So notice a lot of that definition kind of centers on power, doesn't it? Yeah, it's giving away power. Is that what submission was to the Hebrews, though? Because we're reading a book by a group of people called the Hebrews. Is that how they viewed submission, giving away power? Well, the answer is yes, no, think bigger. It always seems to be the answer. Here's what the word is. It's submission. And so to give away, or here's what the word means in a visual picture. It's to walk with someone's wisdom. Did you catch that? It's literally, the picture is someone grabbing your hand and leading you forward. Right? And the idea is I grab your hand, and maybe we're even in the dark. Maybe we're on like a treacherous bridge. I grab your hand and I move you forward in front of me, and you are led by the wisdom I give you. It takes deep trust. It takes an action of allowing, yes, you give away some power, I suppose, but the deeper idea is here is to truly submit was to allow someone to give you their wisdom and lead you forward so that you can take that wisdom, those concepts, those ideas, those virtues, and walk forward in them. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea of submission. So submission, according to the Hebrews, is not becoming a doormat. It's not just saying, whoa, well, I'll do that thing because, I probably should. It's probably, I don't know. I guess I should. Maybe it's not allowing people to just walk all over you. That's not what submission is. Submission is not being a martyr. Yeah, it's not constantly, just take it. Again, it's not virtuously doing that. Making a big scene of you doing the thing, right? It's not being a martyr. That's not at all what submission was to the Hebrews. Submission was not putting everyone else's needs above your own. That wasn't even submission. Submission was not having a poor self-esteem. Oh, woe is me. I'm terrible, so I give this all to you. That was never the intention of submission. Real submission was the idea, I take your hand, you trust that I have your best intentions, and I lead you forward. And that's your action of submitting. We walk in something together, and I lead you forward. And you move ahead at some point. You take on the wisdom that's been given. What a beautiful idea of submission, right? And so in this action, in this moment, the servant, this is what he's doing. And I find this such an interesting shift in how to view this concept. Yes, definitions change, ideas change, but for this book in that era, I think there's something interesting we can also learn. So let's continue. It goes on, and I will adjure with you by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take the wife. So notice this, the word here This word means basically to walk, to move into a foreign place. To walk, so check this out, to rest, make camp, while his servant stays away from the Canaanites. Right? Interesting idea here. The merchants, notice that the Canaanites, the people who are not to be trusted, right? He shares more wisdom here again. He's just giving more wisdom. When you walk, when you go, I will stay here. I will live in this place. I'll set up a camp. I'm going to rest, right? Rest meaning essentially I'm going to pass on soon, right? However, when I do, avoid these people, right? These people are not to be trusted. I'm giving you a little more wisdom. I'm continuing to move you forward while I stay here and I move you forward. That's what's taking place right here, right before our eyes. It's beautiful. And it continues, but you shall go to my land and to my birthplace, and you shall take a wife for my son, Isaac. So again, the hero's journey, right? Go back home, back to the place where we started. Go back to the thing, back where this goodness is found. And this is the really interesting idea for me, is every hero, even in the Hebraic stories, they go back home. Abraham's not going to be able to go back home, but here's the idea. He's starting over again, right? Abraham's not literally starting over, but the idea is it's cyclical, right? Abraham passes something on that the future generations pick up, and it's really interesting. So notice this. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not wish to go after me in this land. Shall I return your son to the land from which you came? And Abraham said, beware lest you return my son back there. And the Lord God of the heavens, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, who spoke about me, who swore to me, saying, to your seed will I give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son there. I love this idea. When we pass on the next thing to the next generations, we have to trust, right? It's like parenting. Danielle and I are understanding this lately. We're understanding that parenting is like just launching rockets, right? You can do everything you can to prepare them for the launch. Everything you can. But in the end, when you hit that red button and they launch, it's really less to do with you now and more to do with the wind, the air, the rocket. Where the rocket wants to go, it's going to go. Right? And you hope that you have given that rocket enough of what it needs, enough fuel, enough energy, enough movement. You hope that you've set it on the right trajectory. And what the rocket does is what the rocket will do, right? And so you send it off. And what a beautiful idea here. Israel's saying, future generations, we trust the promise that when we hit the red button, the stories, the virtues, the values, the rituals, they will lead you on, right? We will. It's like these stories, these rituals, these ideas we passed on, they're taking you and they're moving you forward. We're back here now, and we've allowed you to step forward into the new thing. It's a circle. It's a cyclical idea. It's a beautiful picture for Israel in this moment. And so again, the servant goes back. And so notice this, Nahor. The servant takes 10 camels. He went, and all the best of his masters was in his hand. And he arose, he went to Urim, and Naharaim to the city of Nahor. And so again, this is a really interesting idea. Really interesting. The servant of God back to the place of origins. Again, back to the place where it all began. But it's not Abraham doing it anymore. We're going to have a way for Isaac to step into the picture fully, back to Noah. And I love this quote here. This quote comes from a really famous rabbi thousands of years ago. He said, Isaac will take Abraham's story and move it forward. He will take his people into a deeper, fuller, and richer story. I think this is such a beautiful perspective. When we give the next generation the stories, when we give them the ethics, when we give them the morals, when we give them these different things that are going to help guide them in this compass, I think we can trust that the future is bright. Yes, they'll make their own mistakes, but we have to trust that the future is bright. Abraham passes it down to Isaac, whose story will be rich and full and deep. And so this is the beauty of the story. It's meant to be passed down, right? Our stories, our traditions, our rituals, they're meant to be passed down to the next generations. And when we do, I would argue we live on, don't we? That's how we live on. We live on in those generations that come after us. And if we did it right, if we launched the rockets well, then our stories will continue, won't they? Think of the Hebrew people in Babylonian captivity. I bet never in a million years would they think in 2021 we'd be reading these pieces today. We'd be thinking about them, and then we'd be applying it in whole new ways. I bet they never would have thought of that, right? It would have been amazing to them. Not only has our tribe adopted this, but the world, right? What a beautiful idea. Yeah, the future generations, and with it, we never really die. And so my question to you is simple. What should we pass down? What is worth passing down? Some of us may not have kids. What do you pass on to those younger generations that you see periodically, that you interact with? What wisdom will you give them? Because for Israel was learning to submit, to walk humbly with Yahweh, gathering strength and resilience in order to thrive even in the middle of captivity. This is what they were doing. They were learning to submit, to give to the future generations and trust that the promise was true, that there would be new life for those that were coming after them. So beautiful. And we only went through 10 verses today. Good, right? Here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to take it home. This idea of submission. Richard Foster, in his book, Celebration of Discipline, he brings up some really interesting ideas about disciplines, but one of them in particular is submission. And so he said we can learn to live out submission in some really interesting ways, some very relevant real life ways today. And so I would recommend reading that book if you can. He actually grew up in Garden Grove, California, which is kind of fascinating because I was there for a very long time. Well, not a long time, but for a while. But I learned so much from the book. And so this chapter, I wanted to share some concepts that Foster gives. Number one, he says, submission starts with God, learning to submit to God. And I know that sounds very odd for many of us. What does that look like? How do we live that out? Here's something I might recommend you do. Why not take a moment every morning, or whether it be at night or just throughout the day, say this little prayer, this little idea, as thou wilt, what thou wilt, when thou wilt. This is Thomas Kempis. I love the idea here. Essentially saying, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have today. And whatever I give, I know it's enough. I'm just going to make sure I do the very best I can. And whatever happens, again, I'm launching rockets. I'm doing the very best I can. God, do with it what you will, right? Universe, do with it what you will. However you want to call God, right? Do with it what you will. It's a beautiful idea. Number two, submission to our family. I get it. Like, in this time of all these crazy lockdowns, right? Whether you like them or not, it's been a little crazy. We've been stuck with family, sometimes a little closer than we wanted to. But asking yourself periodically, what can I do to show love and respect to those in my family around me? The people that I'm stuck with every single day. In what ways could I maybe let them know I'm with you? I care about you. I'm here for you. Maybe it's as simple as like, I really wanted pizza, but I know that my daughter wanted Chinese food. So let's do the greasy Chinese food tonight. Let's honor you tonight, right? Finding different ways to submit in that way, I think, is a really beautiful idea. Thinking about someone else. Submission to neighbors, right? We all seem to have them. Some of us love our neighbors more than others. This looks like simple acts of kindness, doesn't it? It looks asking if they need anything from the shop next time you're out, asking if they need help with certain tasks or whatever, learning to find different ways to help your neighbor, right? And this is really the idea, love thy neighbor as thyself. This is what was going on in that era, right? It was about learning to say, what does my neighbor need? Right? Going out of your way to find different ways to help your neighbor experience whatever it is they need, offering it to them, finding different ways to be neighborly. It's a beautiful idea. Submission to neighbors, and then submission to community. This was kind of cool. What is your community? Where do you live? Are you connected with many people in community? You might even be ultra involved. You might be on school boards, church boards, whatever it is. Find different ways to work with people. Ask what they need. What does your community need? Do you have a homeless problem? Well, what can you do? Maybe there's a bunch of kids in your town who don't have lunches, right? Or maybe the schools there really need some people to donate time to be able to pass out lunches. Whatever the need is, find out what it is they need and begin to volunteer. Find ways to give of yourself. This is an act of submission that I find really pretty tangible today. And I would argue when we do that, we actually get to hear the wisdom voices all around us. We actually get to begin to move in this journey where they take us and move us forward. We get to meet those people, journey with them, and maybe even share wisdom of our own. And then lastly, submission to those in need. It goes even a step further here. Who are the widows and the orphans in our communities, right? Who are the people who have just had a hard time coping? Work with those people. Find out what they need. Find out how can you help in the most tangible way possible, and then find ways to do it. And I would argue when we do this, we actually walk with wisdom pretty closely, don't we? Not just wisdom, but love as well. It's a really cool concept, submission. So I hope I was able to really offer up some interesting concepts today. It was only 10 verses, and we've got plenty more. So as always, I would ask, please consider donating to ethos-church.org/donate. We are a tax-deductible donate organization, and so we would love to have you continue partnering with us, building up this ministry. We think there's still a lot to do in this world. And I know there's a lot of crazy things happening, but I think now more than ever, this message could really help people know. And I would argue the communities we build, like the living rooms, discussion groups, all those things, we would love to continue offering more and more of that to people as we grow. And as always, hit that subscribe button, share this with friends, and I hope you have a great day. Can't wait to see you next week when we delve into the rest of chapter 24. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.